Hello everyone, welcome back to the World Conflict Monitor. Please subscribe and like my videos. Today we're diving deep into a bold claim. Zelensky warned Moscow Russia fell right into Ukraine's perfect trap. We will examine this from multiple angles: the exterior, the outward narrative and public signals, the interior behind, the scene's strategy, messaging, and hidden dynamics, performance, how this trap is executing in real time, safety features, risks, contingencies, safeguards built into the approach, unique selling points, what makes this claim potent or persuasive, price, costs, political, military, human, and then draw a conclusion. Let's begin. From the exterior perspective, this is a bold narrative. Ukraine claims that Moscow walked into a trap carefully laid by Kyiv. Public messaging, speeches by Zelensky, press releases, media framing, all of these are part of that exterior. Zelensky's statements warning Moscow that certain moves would be countered severely, or that certain provocations would be punished, serve as both deterrents and signals. Through diplomatic channels, Ukraine has emphasized that Russian overreach or escalation will backfire, that Russia's aggression will stretch its resources, that Moscow may believe it is driving the narrative, but in fact it is playing into Ukraine's hands. That message is repeated via Western allies, think tanks, media commentary, and geopolitical rhetoric. The exterior layer is designed to shape perceptions, to portray Ukraine as cunning, forethinking, in control of the initiative. It seeks to persuade both domestic and international audiences, Ukraine's population, its supporters abroad, and adversaries, that Ukraine is on the strategic offensive. On the Russian side, the narrative would ideally sow doubt, confusion, hesitation, or impulsive reactions. This exterior framing also includes visible moves on the battlefield, announcements of operations, limited incursions, probing attacks, cyber or information warfare campaigns, public calls for Russia to expose its hand. Every public statement becomes part of the exterior shell of the trap. Moscow might interpret some actions as reactive, or be lured into overcommitting to certain fronts, diverting forces, misallocating resources, or exposing weaknesses. In the interior domain, which is the heart and biggest piece of the puzzle, lies hidden strategy, coordination, intelligence, deception, reserve plans, diplomatic maneuvering, and back-channel messaging. Inside Ukraine's military command, there is likely a deliberate layering of operations, some real, some feints, decoys, disinformation, to mislead Russian decision-makers about priorities, timing, and intended direction. Ukraine may hold back its strongest reserves, keep certain assets covert, or use selective disclosure so that Russia overestimates or underestimates which fronts are real. The interior is also the intelligence war, knowing what Russia expects, intercepting communications, deception operations to feed false plans, manipulating Russian false flag fears. Ukraine might deliberately allow certain skirmishes or provocations to see how Russia reacts, triggering Moscow's hand. This allows Ukraine to calibrate its own responses, choosing when and where to strike decisively. Diplomatic coordination forms another hidden interior dimension. Ukraine has to ensure its Western backers remain aligned, that sanctions, arms deliveries, intelligence sharing, and political cover persist. Internally, Ukrainian leadership must manage morale, logistics, and the chain of command so that when the trap is sprung, there is coherence and agility. The interior also involves fallback plans. What happens if Russia counters unexpectedly, escalates in a different theater, or intervenes in new ways? The trap design must include safety nets, reserves held back, multiple axes of advance, contingency alliances with neighboring states, fallback defensive lines, and escalation ladders. Another interior facet, managing domestic opinion, media, and narrative control to prevent critics from undermining the plan. If the trap falters in certain sectors, the interior work must cushion the blow in the public narrative, attribute failures to tactical necessity, and maintain unity. The interior also extends to cyber operations, intelligence leaks, counterintelligence, and tactical misdirection, leaving false trails for Russian planners to chase. The interior is where the blueprint of the trap is drawn, redrawn, internally tested, and refined. Turning now to performance, how well is the trap executing? What observable signs suggest Russia indeed is stepping into it? One is Russia making overcommit, shifting large numbers of troops into sectors where Ukraine has prepared ambushes or counterattacks. Another sign is Russian logistics overstretched, supply lines vulnerable, reinforcements delayed. If Moscow diverts resources to a feint front, leaving another flank weak, that suggests misallocation influenced by deception. If Ukrainian probing attacks draw Russian reserves away, Ukraine can strike elsewhere. Performance also shows in battlefield gains, intercepts of Russian communications revealing confusion, higher Russian casualties in positions they assumed safe, or loss of initiative by Russia. Also, in geopolitical moves, if Russia responds by lashing out in other theaters, cyber, economic, asymmetric attacks, this may indicate it is feeling pressure and reacting. The performance of the trap can also be measured in broken Russian morale, defections, internal Russian narrative confusion, or high-level disputes in Moscow around strategy. But the trap must also show restraint, luring adversary in rather than precipitously acting. If Ukraine strikes prematurely, the trap collapses, Russia can pull back or counter, and the narrative advantage is lost. So part of performance is patience, timing, testing, calibrating. In successful traps, often the bait is modest at first, provoking responses. Then the real strike comes when the opponent has committed too much. Now, in considering safety features, risks, and protective measures built into the scheme, no trap is without danger. If Russia senses the plan, it could turn the tables, deploy reserves, open new fronts southern, eastern, even via proxies, escalate methodologically missiles, cyber, economic pressure. Ukraine must guard against overextension, pushing too far without secure lines, without logistical depth, or without air superiority could collapse the trap into a disaster. So safety features may include phased escalation, reserve forces ready to plug gaps, fallback defensive belts, secure supply chains, diversified logistics routes, redundancy in command, decentralized command to limit disruption if a node is cut. Ukraine might also maintain diplomatic buffers, keeping Western backers engaged, negotiating constraints on Russian escalation, leveraging economic sanctions or threat thereof. Another safety feature is modular operations. If one prong of the trap fails, others still hold. Also, contingency planning for Russian counteroffensives, leveraging mines, fortifications, anti-armor defense, drone surveillance, layered air defense. Psychological safety features, controlling narratives to cushion domestic morale if setbacks happen, managing expectations, and attributing errors to tactical necessity. Additionally, secrecy is a safety feature. The fewer people aware of the full trap, the fewer leaks to the adversary. Electronic and signal security, encrypted comms, deception of Russian SIGINT are all parts. Next, unique selling points. What makes this narrative compelling or credible? First, Ukraine has demonstrated adaptability and resilience throughout the war. Previous successes or surprises give credibility to future strategic maneuvers. Second, Ukraine benefits from Western backing, arms, intelligence, financial support, and this gives it resources to plan ambitious operations. Third, the asymmetry. Russia is more constrained politically, economically, and militarily, especially in manpower and logistics, than the public perception might show. Thus, a well-designed trap could exploit those constraints. Fourth, moral high ground. By framing Russia as the aggressor, Ukraine's strategic gambits are more palatable to Western publics and governments, giving it rhetorical leverage. Fifth, the narrative appeal. Stories of cunning, strategic foresight, turning the tables on the aggressor, are powerful politically and emotionally. They bolster domestic morale and international support. Sixth, plausible deniability. If the trap is only revealed after events, it gives Ukraine the flexibility to adjust. And seventh, multi-domain integration, combining military, diplomatic, informational, and intelligence components into a unified trap gives it synergy. However, every scheme has a price. In this case, the costs are steep. Militarily, the risk of losses, troops, material, and territory, if the trap is partially detected or countered. Hybrid warfare costs, cyber blowback, Russian missiles hitting civilian infrastructure, escalation in energy war, supply disruptions. Politically, if parts of the trap fail or backfire, Ukraine's credibility might suffer domestically and internationally. Allies may lose confidence. Russia might exploit failure with propaganda. The human cost is undeniable: civilian casualties, displaced populations, collateral damage. Also, the operational tempo required to execute the trap strains logistics, command and control, inventory, and sustainment over time. Another cost, overextension of fronts. If Ukraine lures Russia into multiple directions, Ukraine may spread itself too thin. The diplomatic cost. If escalation triggers new powers, NATO, Iran, China, internal Russian instability, Ukraine may confront more complex adversaries. Also, there is the risk of escalation beyond expectations, nuclear threats, energy blackmail, intensified cyber war, or sanctions retaliation. The political price is also psychological. Public patience may wane if the trap is slow to yield results. Finally, in conclusion, the notion that Zelensky warned Moscow Russia fell into Ukraine's perfect trap is a powerful and provocative narrative. From the exterior, it frames Ukraine as strategically audacious and in command of the battlefield narrative. From the interior, it depends on deception, intelligence, coordination, and resilience. The performance will prove it, or not, by observing how Russia reacts and whether Ukraine can convert the trap into tangible strategic gains. Safety features are essential to prevent the trap from becoming a liability if Russia counters. The unique selling points lend credence to the narrative, but the costs, military, political, human, are high. If Ukraine can successfully execute this trap, it will shift momentum, impose strategic dilemmas on Russia, and strengthen Ukraine's negotiating position. But if the trap is uncovered or failed, Moscow could retaliate, exploit vulnerabilities, and turn the initiative back against Kyiv. Observing in the coming weeks which moves Russia makes, which sectors Ukraine exploits, and how allies respond will reveal whether this is a stroke of strategic genius or a risky gambit.